Well, this morning we're going on a kayak trip together, all right? You guys ready to go on a kayak trip? I know, it's crazy. You never know what I'm going to do, right? How many of you enjoy canoeing or kayaking? You know, I used to love canoeing, except years ago when I was a little kid, I'll never forget a church canoe trip we went on. Never go on a church canoe trip, just saying. But I just remember that my brother and I was in this canoe with my grandma and my one set of grandparents, my brother. Man, I'm out of breath. My brother was in the canoe with my mom and dad, and there was like all these canoes going down. We were over in Ohio, going down the Little Miami River. Anybody ever down the Little Miami River? Just curious, a couple of you. All right, so everything was good. You know how it is, canoe trip's going great, but then all of a sudden, the unexpected happens, right? I mean, it just seems inevitable when you're on a canoe trip. The unexpected happens. And so all of a sudden, the current is pulling us back into all this thick brush, all right? And so my grandma, my grandpa, I'm sitting in the middle, I'm just a little thing, and they're just paddling as hard as they can, trying to get out of this thick brush because there's this big wasp nest in the trees. It's never easy, right? It's just never easy. And there's this wasp nest. There's all these wasps just buzzing around, and they're sitting there just swatting, and I'm just hiding down like this, and they're just frantically trying to paddle and paddle. Mike, can you grab my paddle from out from underneath there? Just thank you, sir. You're awesome, man. And they're just frantically paddling, and it was great. I just needed a paddle so I could just illustrate. I mean, I'm just going to break it in half here. We'll just do that in half. So they're just frantically, as they can, they're just going as hard as they can, and this current just keep pulling us back, and there's all these wasps going on. And then, my grandparents, they were just so encouraging to each other during that whole time. I mean, that's the best part of canoe trips, right? I love you, honey. You're just the sweetest thing ever. Just keep using your paddle like that. No, would you move your paddle? It was one of those moments you never forget. I learned a lot that day. So fortunately, as we're caught in this current and there's all these wasps buzzing our heads, somebody else, as they were coming down, saw us. They were able to grab the front of our canoe so we could get unstuck and get out of this crazy predicament we were in so we could continue on downstream. But then it didn't take very long after that, as every canoe trip seems to go. We're packing lunch, right? So there's coolers. Everybody's got all these things in their canoe. You just don't go with nothing. And then, we're not very much farther downstream. We get caught in this current again, and all of a sudden, I see the canoes in front of us. Whoop! And they just start dumping, and there's people swimming, and there's coolers going downstream. There's all kinds of different things going downstream. Guys lost their wallets, their car keys. They're frantically trying to find, everything is just always fun about a canoe trip. And then I remember down a little bit farther, there's this big black snake. This comes from the shore, starts swimming towards our canoe, and you're like, get away, get away. It's like those trips are just crazy, right? So I decided from a young age that I would never own a canoe. I would never have to depend on anybody else not paddling the right way, getting me stuck in a predicament, right? So I bought a kayak. I actually bought 2 kayaks, right? So I could go out on the water by myself and do this thing all alone without having to worry about somebody taking my fishing spot, somebody getting me stuck in a bee's nest, right? So I could just do this whole journey by myself until the moment where you find yourself in a predicament where you're all alone, wishing there was somebody to pull you out, right? So today we're going to continue in this series we called Messy. We saw that graphic there, Messy, that loving others isn't easy. And we're going to go on a kayak or canoe trip together this morning. And I will come back to this here in just a bit as just an illustration, because the truth of the matter is that God never intended us to go alone. But the challenge is, like on canoe or kayak trips, there's always the unexpected that happens along the course of the way, right? And it gets really messy really quick sometimes. And you're wishing you had somebody yelling at you, threatening you with a paddle, right, to help you get out of that predicament, all right? So today we're going to be talking about this topic of carrying each other's burdens. and just understanding this key principle, this really key command that is in Scripture and how God designed us to carry each other's burdens. And we're going to look at this verse where this phrase, this topic comes from, and it's in the book of Galatians. And so I want to give you a little bit of background. The Apostle Paul founded this church in Galatia, and in Mesopotamia area over in the Middle East. And during this time, this is during the Roman Empire, first century, during this time, there were some issues that arose in the church. Go figure, right? There's some issues, and there's some division going on in the church over the law, right? And so there's some people, these Jewish believers are like, look, these Gentiles, these non-Jewish believers, they have to be circumcised. Right? And so there's all this debating. Do they have to be? Do they not have to? Matter of fact, we see in the scriptures where the Apostle Paul then goes to Jerusalem to one of these first early councils in the church, and he goes and he gets together with James, the brother of Jesus, and Peter and some others, just to, what do we believe? What are we supposed to stick to? Because there was all this divisiveness going on in the church. And so as Paul writes a letter to this church, this is where we get this command in scriptures. I want to put it up here on the slide, on the side screens. Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, the Apostle Paul wrote this: "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ." Now, I think this is really interesting because Paul wants to throw in this word law, right? Because that's the issue, one of the big issues going on in the church. And the stumbling block is, are we saved by grace? Or are we saved by doing the works of the law? And Paul's trying to emphasize, look, guys, we're saved by grace. It's not by our works, it's by grace. Why have you gotten hung up in this whole thing about the law? So he says, well, let me just kind of give it to you this way. Here's what you're supposed to do. Here's the expectation. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law. But then he throws in this extra word, the law of what? The law of Christ. Now, this is referenced a couple times in some of Paul's letters. And so what I want us to understand that typically when you go on a canoe or a kayak trip, you pack your lunch, right? I mean, that's why these guys had a cooler, and you pack your lunch, you go out, you're going to be out there for a couple hours, you pack some food. And so this verse right here is like the meat. If you're a meat eater, I'm not, but let's just say it's fish, right? This is like the meat of the sandwich. And we're going to look at some of the surrounding verses, but this is really kind of a key part of this entire letter that Paul is trying to emphasize to this church that's divided over these issues, that when you carry each other's burdens, you are actually fulfilling the law, but not the law of Moses. You're fulfilling the law of Christ, which begs the question, what does that mean? What is the law of Christ that Paul is referring to? Because we don't have any real reference here. It's only Paul's one. It's only mentioned this in the New Testament. So we need to understand what is the law of Christ. And what does it mean to just carry each other's burdens in order to do this? I'm so glad you asked that question because I'm going to answer it. So I want us to kind of look at this phrase, fulfill the law of Christ. You can put it back up there. Sorry, Robin. This phrase, fulfill the law of Christ. This is what Paul says. When you actually do this, when you carry each other's burdens, you are fulfilling the law of Christ. Now, I think that if Paul's stating that, then we need to understand what actually is the law of Christ that we're expected to fulfill. Because this is an important thing. So I want to go back to the Gospels during the time of Jesus, when Jesus was doing ministry. And debating Scripture was just a common thing among Jews, especially among the Jewish leadership. They loved to sit around and debate Scripture. There was the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the two key leading sects of the Jewish faith. And they had different views that they liked to bicker over. The Sadducees, they were sad, you see, because they didn't believe in angels, right? They were sad because this is how you remember these things, because they didn't believe in angels. They didn't really believe in the Spirit. They were just kind of what you see is what you get kind of people. And then there's the Pharisees that did believe in the supernatural. They did believe in the invisible. They did believe in the Spirit and the move of the Spirit, and they did believe in angels. And so there was often these debates that would go on, and they would sit there and they would just challenge each other. So what does the law mean to you? What does the law mean to us? And then Jesus comes on the scene, and he just ruffles everybody's feathers. Because Jesus just brings a whole different dynamic to everything. And now he comes on the scene and he's raising the dead. He's casting out demons. He's healing people. He's breaking the law on the Sabbath by rolling, grain and eating it. And so there's all these instances where these religious leaders would come and they would challenge Jesus. And they wanted to know, it's like, okay, if you're a teacher of the law, then what does the law actually teach? And so one day, we see this in several of the Gospels. I'm going to look in Matthew chapter 22. This is what happens one day when Jesus is out doing ministry. Matthew 22, starting in verse 35. It says, one of these experts in law, one of them, an expert in religious law, tried to trap him with this question. They were always trying to trip him up on something. And he asked this question. He says, Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses? Now, he's asking, what is the most commandment? Over 300 commands in the Old Testament in the law of Moses. It's like, which one out of all the laws, which one is the most important? Since you're such an expert, since you know everything, right? It's kind of challenging here. Which one out of all 300 and some, of them is the most important one? So Jesus replies, Jesus replied, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And he says the second is equally important. And this is equally important. This is important. He says, love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, these two commands are intertwined. These two commands are inseparable. This is what Jesus is saying. These are the key to everything. And then it says in verse 40, Jesus says, the entire law and all the demands of the prophets, everything that's there in the law, everything just is summed up in these two things based on these two commandments. They are equally important. They are inseparable. You cannot do the second one without the first one. So he's trying to tie this. This is everything. And then the guy, this expert in religious law, responds and he says, you are right. So here Jesus says, this is the key. All right, now I want us to kind of go back. I'm going to kind of confuse us a little bit this morning. We're going to go back to the book of Galatians, all right, because this was the issue kind of going on in the church. Do they have to be circumcised? Do they not? What does it mean to keep the law? What is this whole thing? So this is what the Apostle Paul writes to the Galatian church in Galatians 5, verse 14. All right, we just heard what Jesus said. This is what Paul wrote. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping what? This one command. All right, Paul says this, the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command, love your neighbor as yourself. Now, skeptics would love to look at this and say, I knew it. There's contradictions in the Bible because Jesus said there were two that all of the law and the prophets hinged on. And Paul, he writes, he says, there's one, and this one is the one that fulfills all of it. Well, we need to kind of look at this and understand, that's the question one, is Paul contradicting Jesus? Well, the answer to that question is no. Paul is actually emphasizing a key point here. Because the part that we don't often see because we don't read or speak Greek, right, is that this whole thing, this word is agapeo in the Greek. And agapeo is God's kind of love. You can't agape another person and love them with God's kind of love without loving God, without being in relationship with God. So what Paul is doing is Paul is making it really short and brief and to the point. He's like, guys, all this division's going on. You're bickering over all of these things, but this is the one command that ties it all together. We're to have agape with each other, God's kind of love. This is what it means. And so just kind of putting this next bullet point up here, the law of Christ. Here's what the law of Christ is. This is what Paul is after. The law of Christ is the law of God's love. You can't agape without the love of God. That's why Jesus says that the two are inseparable. You have to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength first so that you have God's agape kind of love, an unconditional kind of love, a kind of love that's not self-focused, it's others-focused. We have to have that kind of love, and that's why Paul emphasizes, look, guys, you want to narrow it down to one law you need to keep. Here's the one. Love your neighbor as yourself, because you can't agape somebody else without God's love. And this ties it all together. And so that's why it's in our mission statement, right? We have it out on the wall. Love God. That's where it has to start. That's the whole point of our icon. It's pointing up. It has to start with God first. It's the outflow of what God does in our lives, His unconditional love that He gives us, that we, as we're in right relationship with God, we can then give it away. We cannot love others with all their hurts, habits, and hang-ups, all their challenges. We cannot love others with God's kind of love unless we are first in right relationship with God. And that's why Paul says this one command ties it all together, because without agape, you can't have agape apart from God, and you can't agape others without God's love. So this is the outflow of who we are, and this is an emphasis we see in the New Testament. It's what Jesus teaches, and it's what Paul and Peter and James and others teach. This is this whole thing. Now, Jesus really emphasizes this at one point with his disciples because what we tend to not see, we see these little stories and we kind of laugh and joke at some of the things the disciples did because they were kind of messy and knuckleheads like we are many times, right? And so there were times when Jesus, when he got near the end of his ministry, he's entering into Jerusalem and he's been with his disciples for 3 years, and yet these guys still don't get it. They still think it's about building an earthly kingdom, and Jesus is setting up his kingdom now that he's coming into Jerusalem. And so guess what starts happening among the disciples? They start thinking politics. They start talking politics. They start practicing politics. They start politicking with each other. Matter of fact, there's 2 brothers that get their mom, and they come to Jesus, and they're like, hey, Jesus, when you enter in your kingdom and you're sitting on the throne, we think we're good leaders. Would you grant it that I could sit at your right and be your right-hand guy because I can lead well. I've got this. So, I can be, and my brother, he and John, there's James and John, these 2 brothers, and he can sit at your left and one can sit on the right, and we're there with you in the kingdom, because we want to be influential in the kingdom when you are on the throne. And Jesus says, look, you guys don't even know what you're asking. He says, can you drink the cup? He's like, oh, yeah, we can drink out of any cup, man. And he's talking about the crucifixion, right? About them dying, and you're like, yeah. And he goes, well, yeah, that will happen, but they don't completely understand it. Then there's another time where there's a couple other guys, they're thinking money, right? They're thinking about the finances. How are we going to fund this thing? Jesus, why are you letting that woman break that alabaster jar with that expensive perfume? They just wasted all that perfume. We could have sold that and had money. And then there's bickering going on among the disciples, so Jesus has to speak into this because we are messy, right? And it's easy to get worked up over all these different things because we see the world differently, we understand the world differently. So this is what Jesus says in John chapter 13. All right, this is right before the whole upper room discourse. John chapter 13, and Jesus says this. He says, so now I'm giving you a new commandment. Now, as a Jew, thinking about hearing Jesus say, I'm giving you a new command, I'm sitting there thinking, oh, come on, Jesus. There's already 300 and some commands we already got to follow. Why are you adding one more to the mix? And in a sense, when you think about it, it's like, okay, is it really a new command? It's really just kind of a tie-in of the whole thing. But he says, I'm giving you a new commandment. And he says, love each other. What does Jesus say? Love each other. Jesus is saying, I want you to get this. If there's one thing I want you to get above anything else, is this command that I'm giving you. This one command. Now we understand why Paul wrote what he wrote. This one command, love each other. How? Just as I have loved you. Now at this point, they don't really understand what's about to unfold over the next day, with him being beaten, scourged, arrested, beaten, scourged, and then crucified on a Roman cross. He says, love each other just as I have loved you. You should love each other. Verse 35, he says, here's the deal. Your love, your agape kind of love, your God's kind of love for one another will prove to the world that you're my disciples. Not your political viewpoints. Not any of your viewpoints. Your love for one another. That's what is going to stand out among you. That's what's going to prove to the world that you are my followers by your love for each other. It's not going to be easy. And it's going to be really messy sometimes. It was with the disciples, and it was in the early church. Last week, we had a great 6-year anniversary party, right? It was a great time being together, right? It was a lot of fun, and I talked about just what it was like for the early church. We read Acts chapter 2, and if we stop there, it's like, oh man, the church is awesome. They saw signs and wonders. They're committed to studying the Word of God, and God was adding to their numbers. Every day, thousands of people are coming to Christ. They're meeting at homes. They're meeting every day. They're sharing, selling things and sharing each other. They're letting people, no, don't, you're not going to use my kayak. Anyway, it's like they're sharing everything in common. It's all great and everything's fine. But then you read just a little bit farther in the book of Acts, and it's just like every other place in the Bible. It gets really messy really quick. Some of the widows were getting missed. They weren't getting food where they were in need. And there was all these things and all these grumblings and complaining start coming to the leaders of the church. Like, hey, our people aren't getting the food they're supposed to be getting. And so it just got really messy really quick because we are a messy people. But Jesus says, here's the one thing I want you to understand. One thing I want you to remember. A new command. Love each other just as I have loved you. Now, I got this kayak up here because as we're in this journey, it's kind of like being in a kayak or canoe going down a stream. We're in this journey. And the thing is that there's all kinds of turns. We can't see what's around the bend. We can't see that log just right over the water that had fallen the night before. We've been on this river before, right? But that log fell, and it's right where heavy current is. And we're like frantically freaking out. It's like, I'm going to be decapitated. Right? I'm going right towards it. I'm paddling backwards as fast as I can, and the unexpected happens. And then we're saying nice things to each other as we're in our kayak. It's a great marriage builder, let me tell you. Every time Cindy and I go canoeing together, we just pray for each other. We bless each other. We speak positive and hurtful things to each other. and see, the reality is that Jesus knows all the junk that we carry with us in the journey. He knows our hurts, our habits, our hang-ups, our brokenness, our sin that's in our life. And yet Jesus, he could have chose to just say no. But instead of choosing division, he chose proximity and presence to be with us, to help us. Knowing that we got all this stuff, he extended grace and his unconditional love when we didn't deserve it. And the truth is that we are not meant or intended to go through this journey alone. We're to be with other people along the way. Matter of fact, if you go all the way back in the beginning, in the book of Genesis, the very beginning of creation in the Bible, we see that when God created all the beasts of the field and all the birds of the sky, and then he creates Adam. And Adam's in the garden, he's just confused, right? He's wandering around, he's looking for a companion, right? And it's like, there's none, there's compatible. And so then for the first time, everything that God created, he said was good. And for the first time, God says, it's not good for man to be alone. He'll never make it down the river in his kayak if he's by himself. He won't know how to pack his lunch if he's by himself. He won't look at the GPS. He'll go way past where he's supposed to get out, right? It's not good for the man to be alone. He needs a suitable helper. So God takes the rib out of Adam and creates the woman. And then Adam says these two words in the Hebrew. He says, at last. You know what at last means? It means, now that's what I'm talking about. Right? That's what it means. He says, at last, there's one that is like me because God created us in his image, out of community. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, out of our God who's three in one, out of community, he creates mankind in his image for companionship, for relationship. We need other people to go through this journey together. That's how God made us. Now, I want to go back to answering the question. So Paul writes to this church in Galatia, and he says, carry each other's burdens. Because when we do that, we actually fulfill the law of Christ. And so we need to ask the question, what is a burden? Because we all have burdens, right? And so a burden would be something, as we're going to look at these other verses around this here, a burden could be temptation. A burden could be a sin in our life. A burden could be the unexpected things that happen in life, right? Those of you that are married, the day we got married, it was great, right? We were all excited. Everything was great, but then you get a weekend, it's like, why are you doing it that way? That's not the right way, right? My way is always the right way. Your way's not, right? But then you have kids. Those you have kids, it's like, why can't they just be perfect? Right? And then it's like there's all these challenges that we have. There's health issues that happen, right? I'm not saying kids are a burden. I'm just saying there's unexpected things that happen along the way. The unexpected hits. Sin enters into the picture. Our brokenness gets manifested. We have a health issue. We have a job loss. There's all kinds of crises that come along the way. We get stuck in a canoe with two grandparents with wasps swarming all around us, and they're yelling at each other top of their lungs, and I'm just trying to live. I'm thinking, God, please, I pray that if I ever get out of this, I will never own a canoe the rest of my life. I will go this alone. There's unexpected things that happen. Matter of fact, you were talking about carrying each other's burdens. Yesterday, I just want to commend just a handful of guys. Tom Collins, Jason Jacks. Some of you don't know this. Alan Swim was running camera. Paul Smith, I don't know if Paul's here. Paul's sitting there in the back. And we had, our great loving couple, they've been lifetime missionaries, Dick and Judy Amos. They live on 22 acres down in the south part of Morgantown and Fruitdale. And they discovered that their trees, these big trees, the roots were destroying the dam. And there's a little pond, and it's their water. It's their water system. It's their water source. And the dam is eroding because of the roots. And so, Judy, Cindy and I just happened to stop by at Labor Day. We came back, and Cindy's like, where do they live? And so I pulled in, and it's like, oh, man, this is awesome. I would love to live here, so we're going to boot them out here in a couple years. Anyway, So then Judy was telling us about how the dam was starting to breach because of these roots. And so it was like, we need to get some guys together. And so I'm, I don't know how to cut down trees. I don't work very hard, do I, Jason? So it's like, I need some guys that are used to doing this. And so Jason caught wind of it. He said, hey, I'll bring my chainsaw. I'll go down there and cut down. And Tom's like, hey, so I got these two mountain men here. It's like, we can take down anything. It was amazing watching these guys. So these guys' trees were about as big around as this. So me and Paul, man, he's like Paul Bunyan. That guy had an axe. I was like, dude, use the chainsaw. No, we're going to use the axe. So Jason and Tom, their tree is like this big around. Our tree's like this. So I can tell you what, you guys work down here, and we'll go down here. I'll pull weeds. I'll make myself useful. And it was amazing because we both started at each end. The experts, they were just dropping these huge trees, cutting notches in them. And then Tom, man, you abused that F-150 yesterday. I mean, those things are more than halfway in the pond. He's got that thing hooked up with chains, and they're just yanking that thing up and out of the water and just dragging that thing on. It's like, wow, that was crazy. We're down there. But we met in the middle, and we got all those trees cut down. We're just talking about this unexpected thing. It's like, wow, I didn't expect this to happen. Just seeing the body of Christ, that's what it means to carry each other's burdens. Because the unexpected happens all the time. Now let's get really messy with what Paul says here in this passage in Galatians, where the bread comes in for the meat. So going back to verse 1, Galatians 6:1, Paul says this. Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Now, this is one of the reasons why we don't like going to life groups, right? And we don't like even sometimes going to church, because I don't want anybody to catch me sinning. Someone might just find out that I'm not this perfect little angel after all, and that I'm broken just like everybody else, right? And we all have this fear of being caught. Now, I want us to understand what's going on here, because it's a little bit different. This word sin here is different from other words used in sin. Like when Paul says, all have sinned and fall short of God's glory. This word sin here is a little different, but it's kind of hard for us because we don't speak Greek once again. This word sin here can be translated fault or a trespass, and basically what it refers to is the unexpected. We're in the kayak, we're going down the stream, we're thinking, man, I got this. It's better being by myself. I don't have to depend on somebody else. And then all of a sudden, whoa, the unexpected happens, and I find myself in a predicament, and I need and wish that I had someone else there to help get me out. But because I was convinced that I could go alone, I am now trapped and in a very dangerous situation that I can't get out of. And this is what Paul is referring to here when he says if someone is caught in a sin, the unexpected happens. It wasn't something that you got up and planned. It was something that unexpectedly happened. And he says, and if you see that person, that you're to come alongside them and gently help them get back in the water and on course through the journey together. Unless, being careful, unless, you got a swarm of bees coming around you, and then you find yourself there, and you're like, you stupid, why did you ever go on this? Why did you ever convince me to go on this trip with you? Right? And then we find ourselves getting caught up in sin ourselves. So this is what Paul's saying here, that this is an unexpected thing happens. And we need other people around us to help get us out. And this is why the emphasis when Jesus says, love each other. This is a new command. Love each other. Paul says this one command sums it all up. And that if you do this, if you love with this agape kind of love, you are fulfilling the law of Christ. And being there to help other people when they get stuck and carrying their burdens, which means there's times when we got to be real with each other. We need each other. I was just listening to a podcast yesterday, and it was very interesting listening to this church leader talk about predicting what the future in the next couple of years of the church might be like. And how the church had better be ready like it's never been ready in our country before for one anothering. Because the way things are going, the way laws are being passed, there's already a number of things that are outlawed in a number of states around our country. The things are going to get a lot harder and a lot worse. And we had better get used to meeting in homes and one anothering, because we're going to need each other to get through. Jesus told us this was going to happen. It's not anything that he's surprised by. And that's why he commanded the disciples, love each other. You need each other. And then we get to the other part of the sandwich is carry each other's burdens. And then we get down to verse 3. So there's going to be times when we're going to get caught up in something. And then verse 3 says, here's the deal. If anyone thinks that they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Because it's easy to think, right? Hey, I got this. I can do this. I don't need you. I'm smart enough. I'm strong enough. I can just get my own kayak, go do my own thing. And then he tells us in verse 4, he says, here's the deal. Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone. I know this is kind of confusing. I'm going to explain this. Without comparing themselves to someone else. And so basically what Paul is saying here is it's easy just to be self-focused and think we can just go this journey alone. And we start looking at other people. It's like, man, I'm glad I'm not them. I'm glad I didn't buy that cheap kayak. Mine's got all the bells and whistles on. I can get right on through that current. I can get right. It's easy to look around and start comparing ourselves with each other. And thinking, well, what I've got is much different. And I can do this. And Paul says, stop being self-focused. Stop looking around and comparing with others. Because when you start focusing on yourself or trying to compare and looking, he says, look at your own actions. Does it measure up to fulfilling the law of Christ? Because when you start focused on yourself, guess what? You're not fulfilling the law of Christ. You're not being a part of carrying each other's burdens. And then he throws in this last verse we're going to look at today, verse 5. He says this, for each one should carry their own load. Now you're really confused, right? Because one moment, Paul's writing, he says, carry each other's burdens. And then he starts talking about, don't look around, don't compare, don't get caught up. Don't, if you see somebody doing something, don't get caught up and get tempted and fall in this whole thing. And then he gets to verse 5, he says, each one should carry their own load. Well, wait a minute, Paul, which is it? Are we supposed to carry each other's burdens? Or are we supposed to do this thing by ourselves? Now, here's why I brought the kayak this morning. Here's what I want you to understand. The word load is different from the word burden. When I bought this kayak, I had to go stand on the scale and see how much I weighed. Right? Because this kayak has got this warning sticker on here that says what its capacity is. And the capacity, if I can read it, which I can't, I think it's 250 pounds. All right, so I need to know how much I weigh so that when I'm going on the journey in life that I don't outweigh the capacity of this kayak. Because if I put too much weight and I exceed 250 pounds, guess what? My kayak is now a submarine. Not good. I've seen guys out there on boats thinking, dude, you're about that close to being a sub. You didn't stand on the scale before you bought that thing, right? So if you could just hand me some of these things that are up here, set them up here. So here's what I want us to understand. When it comes to load, that each one of us, the way God designed us, thank you. There's another bag down there. If you could just grab that, thank you. Sorry, Mike, you didn't know you were going to be being part of this sermon today, but you are. Hey, look at that. Man.
Yeah, there you go.
We even have a fishing pole. Man, now we're in business, man. Telescoping fishing pole. Anyway, I didn't mean to get this out. There's no water here. All right, we got to make sure we got all the things along the course way. Got my life jacket in here, got my fishing pole ready to go. So I got to think about what are all the things. I want to make sure I got my lunch, right? So I got to know all the things I'm going to need in my kayak going along the journey, So I wanted to make sure that I had everything that I needed. So I'm just going to pull some other things out here. Now here's what I just want to understand. The way God designed each and every one of us is that every one of us have a capacity of a load that we can carry. And so one of the loads, the way God designed us, we'll see back in the very beginning, is we got a his and a hers, right? So I'm going to get married, right? So I got his or so I got to fit all this stuff in my life, right? I got to go out and get a job so I can make money, so I can take food along the course of the way. So I got to get some food in here in my kayaks. We'll put that back here. And so there's all these things. And then, after you get married, then we decided to have a child. So I got to make sure I got a life jacket for the little kid. Got to fit that in my life, right? And then we decided to make our load a little bit more. And we had a second child. So I got to make sure as the other one's getting bigger, I got another life jacket for the second child. And that was a big load. And then we had a third. And then we had a fourth. Right? So the load's getting bigger. But guess what? You kind of, when you have, a couple kids, you think, man, I don't know, 3? Whoo, 2's enough. I don't know. And then by the time you have the third one, that whole diaper thing, change it. You let the other 2 just kind of go do their thing. It's like you're starting all over again by the time you get to 3. And then you get to 4, and it's really not that hard. And you quickly realize that you have pretty good capacity. We're not going under yet. We still have great capacity. And I got to get a job so I can make some money, right? So I can put money in there, got my food, I got all these things. And then when it talks about load, then you got laundry. It's like, man, does it ever stop? And this thing just starts, adding up and adding up, right? And so the weight capacity that God designed us, after a while, we're like, you know what? We can handle quite a bit. And Paul's saying each one should carry their own load. We have a capacity of what God has given us. Now, oftentimes I'll hear Christians say, God will not give you more than you can handle. That's actually not a biblical verse. It's actually not biblical at all. It's kind of a combination of a couple things. What God says in 1 Corinthians 10:13 is that he will not let us be tempted beyond what we can handle or we can bear. But when we are tempted, it says that he will always provide a way out. All right? God designed us to have a capacity for carrying our load. That as long as we stay within the load limit of what he's given us, the challenge is in our culture today is we're like, man, I got to do this, I want to do this, and we have all these other things that we want to throw in, and the next thing we know, we are way overloaded because we just think that busyness is godliness, right? And next thing you know, we're completely in a mess of things, and our kayak starts to become a submarine. But for the most part, God designed us to carry the load that we have, and we can manage it pretty well. But then what happens is when crisis hits, the unexpected happens. And now all of a sudden, there's a food shortage. Now all of a sudden, I got my money bags here. Now all of a sudden, we've got a financial issue. There's nothing in the bank. And now all of a sudden, my load starts shifting, and it starts to become a burden in some areas. There's issues going on in my marriage. There's issues going on with a child or a family member, whatever. Now all of a sudden, the load with what God designed me to carry, now all of a sudden there's a burden that comes in. This is what Paul is talking about. And then as easy as I could pick this thing up by myself, now I find myself in a predicament that I can't carry this load. There's things that have come a burden now, and I am going under. And so Paul says the same thing that Jesus says. He says, this is what I want you to get. This is the command that Jesus gave us. Carry each other's burdens. And in this way, you fulfill the law of Christ. So, Mike, I'm going to have you come up here. John, if you can come on up here. I know you didn't want to be a part of this. You're like, what? Neil, why don't you come on up here? All right, so here's the deal. Here's what I want you to grab an end. There's a handle on that end. I want you to grab an end. Neil, if you could just grab that side, and I'm going to grab this side. And we can just pick this thing up. See, we can all carry it together. This is what God designed for us to do. This is carrying each other's burdens. Okay, you guys can set this down. That's the last time you'll touch my kayak. The goal I just want us to understand is this is how God designed us to operate. We need one another. God commands us 48 times in the New Testament. It says to one another. And this is one of them where it says, carry each other's burdens because the unexpected happens and we need each other to be there to help us get unstuck and get out of the rut, the mess that we get in, so we can continue together in this journey that God called us to in Christ. Amen? Let me pray.